Have you ever asked the question, do egg donors get parental rights? Well, if you have, you're in the right spot. My name is Corlandos Scott, and I probably answer this question every day as an assisted reproduction attorney. So stick around and we'll talk about it. Now, I know it may seem like a bit of a trick question. Do egg donors get parental rights? But I wish there were a hard and fast way to answer the question. Unfortunately, you're going to get your least favorite attorney answer. It may depend. Now, to the question of, is an egg donor the genetic parent of a child born through the process? The answer is yes. It's actually their genes that we're using to create the embryos. But that does not equal the same thing as having legal parental rights. In this video, we're going to look at, as an intended parent, why would you ever have contact with a donor after the donation process? We'll also talk about the biggest factor affecting whether or not a donor gets the legal right to be a parent. And lastly, we'll talk about the main purpose of the contract. You want to stick around because you don't want to miss that part. Let's jump right into it. More often than not, the topic of whether donors are legal parents doesn't come up that much. And the reason for that is because, for the most part, many egg donation arrangements are anonymous in nature, meaning the intended parents or the recipients of the eggs never know the legal identity of the egg donor that they're working with. And of course, vice versa. The egg donor never knows the legal identity of the intended parents that she's donating to, or recipients. So, in those arrangements, they're matched according to profiles. Each party gets a certain profile about the other. Maybe their physical characteristics, their education, their looks, and that's about it. So this brings up the question, why would you as a recipient or intended parent ever have contact with an egg donor after the donation is complete and you're back home with your beautiful baby? Well, there's a few circumstances. The first, of course, is medical reasons. God forbid anything happened to your beautiful baby that's a medical issue and it's considered to be genetic in nature. If that were to happen, you may want to reach out to the donor or have the right to reach out to the donor in order to find out if she has any information that could help you address the physical medical issue that your child is dealing with. On the other hand, you also want to know if she finds out anything about her health or the health of her children that may be important for you to know to look out for in your child. So it's really a two-way street. You want to be able to contact her to get information you need, and it would only be fitting if you reached out to her to give her health and medical information about your child, as it may affect her or her children. There's also the additional issue of your child and what your child wants. Some parents or recipients of egg donations are open to telling their child about how the child came into the world. And with that, sometimes comes the desire for the child to know, or at least to speak with, the donor who helped them come into the world. So if that's the case, you would want to make sure that you leave the door open for that type of communication. But these are the two main reasons as to why you would ever even have contact with the donor after the arrangement is complete. So let's get into the big question. What determines if an egg donor has the right to claim parental position? Well, that is going to depend on a number of factors, like I mentioned. There is no one answer completes it all. So we have to ask a few questions. Number one, is the donor anonymous or known? Now, I mentioned earlier that most donations are anonymous. However, the trend is actually moving towards donors being known. I'm seeing more and more recipients and intended parents being open to being known and sharing their identity with the donor, and more donors also being open to being known and sharing their identity with the recipients. So in that scenario, we have to look at whether there's an anonymous or known donation. Of course, different states handle things differently. So you have some states that are a little more friendly to the process of egg donation and making sure the recipients have absolute legal parental rights, and then you have others that are not so friendly. Take Ohio, for instance. Ohio has been known to rule very strongly in favor of the egg donor's right to claim parental rights, even in the face of a valid contract stating the opposite. So you want to be sure that you know exactly what your state says about this process. For instance, let me tell you a story about this 2005 case. There was a female same-sex couple that went through the egg donation process. Let's say mother 1 and mother 2. Mother 1 donated her eggs in order to create embryos to hopefully carry the baby to birth. So that made mother 1 the genetic parent of the child. In fact, they had twins. So mother 1 is the genetic parent of the twins. Mother 2, she's just the partner of mother 1. However, they had an egg donation contract that said mother 1 was donating the eggs to mother 2, and I believe mother 2 even carried the children. So that's the scenario you have. Unfortunately, 5 years later, the couple split up, and mother 1 wanted full custody of the twins. And what did the court do? Even in the face of a valid donor agreement, the court gave mother 1 full custody of the twins. So you have to be careful about what the laws say in the state you're in when you undertake the process. Again, there's no hard and fast answer to does a donor absolutely not or absolutely get legal parental rights. Hey, if you're getting any value from this information, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Go ahead. Yeah, that little button down below. Go ahead, click it, and while you're at it, click the little bell right beside it. That bell will let you know when we release new videos. You'll get alerts straight to you. So make sure you subscribe and stay tuned because I have tons of great information coming out for you. Now let's talk about the biggest factor affecting whether or not a donor has the right to claim legal parentage, and that is the egg donation contract. The reason I say it's the biggest factor is because it's what determines the intent of the parties. Oftentimes, when courts are ruling about child custody, the main thing is the best interest of the child, and in donation and assisted reproduction matters, it's also the intent of the parties. And the egg donation contract rules over that intent component. So here are a few things you want to make sure that you have in that egg donation contract. The first thing you need to make sure of is that you state the intention of the donation. Now, there needs to be a medical reason as to why you're going through the egg donation process. It's not just a shopping trip to Costco or something. Also, you need to make sure that you have clearly stated the donor's intention to relinquish all of her rights and responsibilities with regards to the eggs and the subsequent embryos that are created from the eggs. And of course, any right that a court may think she has to the children that results from those embryos. And you want to make sure that the donor states her intent that it's in the best interest of the child that the recipients and the intended parents be deemed the legal parent of any child that results from the donation. Now you may be saying, wait a second, Corlandos, I did an egg donation, or I started to do an egg donation, or I looked into egg donation and I didn't see anything about a contract. Well, there may be a few times where there isn't a formal contract, but believe me, there should be. And that's when you're working with an egg bank. There are such things as egg banks, and they're very similar to sperm banks in the sense that you have donors who donate their eggs, and the clinic banks them, or the bank banks them or holds them for hopeful parents who come along and want to take custody of those eggs. In those scenarios, most times the bank or the clinic will simply give you a consent form to sign. Even in those instances, I would advise you to talk to a legal professional to make sure that you understand what you're signing in those consent forms, and to make sure that in those consent forms that the donor gives up her complete rights and responsibilities to those eggs that you hope to get from that bank. Now, we've talked about how important the contract is, and the reason that the contract is so important is because that's what courts are going to look to when there's a dispute on the line between parties. Is there an agreement between the parties? And if so, what does that agreement say about the parties' intentions? If the intent is clear in the contract, that goes a long way towards settling any disagreements. Let me say this as an aside though. The question of does a donor get parental rights? I sort of feel that it's a little overblown, because let me tell you why most donors, at least in my experience of the hundreds of donors that I've represented, why most donors don't want parental rights over your child. The main reason is because your donor is donating her eggs. However, that's only half of the human-making picture. Remember, you're going to have the sperm of the intended father or of a sperm donor that creates the embryo that goes on to become the fetus that someone carries to live birth. And that donor has no say in whose sperm was used to create the embryo. So I would say most times a donor isn't going to want to just come around and take possession or custody of a baby that they had no chance in deciding who the father or the parental genetic line was. So I think it's a little overblown, but we still want to make sure that we're clear on whether or not it's possible. One of your safety nets, so to speak, in the egg donation process is going to be your fertility clinic. Most reputable fertility clinics will not proceed with doing an egg retrieval from a donor or especially creating embryos from a donor's eggs unless they know that there is a written agreement in place. And that's where your lawyer comes in. Your lawyer is going to typically issue what we call a legal clearance letter to the clinic, clearing the clinic to go ahead and start the medical process. So one thing to make sure that you do with your clinic is check with your clinic about their consent forms. This is a pro tip. Make sure there's nothing in those consent forms with your clinic that says what to do with any leftover eggs that's different from what you want. So for instance, you don't want your donor contract to say, if there are any remaining eggs or embryos, they will be destroyed. But your clinic consent forms say something different like, if there are any remaining eggs or embryos, we'll donate them to medical science or to another couple for infertility purposes. So pro tip, make sure you check those clinic consent forms. If you're thinking about the egg donation process, you may also be thinking about the surrogacy process. If you are, I have something for you. Make sure you click the link below and get access to my tool called the Surrogacy Roadmap. It's a tool where I walk you through the entire surrogacy process from start to finish, and you'll know what to do first, second, third, fourth, and even last. So make sure you click the link below, and I'll be sure to guide you from dream to delivery.